How to understand death is the subject for today's evening. Wherever there is a study of spiritualism, we find a study of death, and wherever there are a group of people who try to understand God and God consciousness, and the group of people who want to turn towards themselves from the worldly matters, wherever there are a group of philosophy students, students of religion and students of theology, there will be inevitably a chapter on death and understanding death. This unfailingly proves how much the human being is dreaded of death. It is the fear complex of the human being that made him discuss about death more often than it is necessary, and as a result of which every philosophical discourse includes the discussion and understanding of death also. In fact, there are important things as important as death to be understood. For example, birth and span of life, life before death. That is, the duties we have to perform before we die, and the things that we are expected to do when we are living. But generally, people are inclined to think more of life after death than life before death. But what is more useful is life before death, because it is more true than the other. However, scientifically we may think and try to understand about death and life after death, it is only a sweet imagination of the human mind and nothing else, and a speculation of a wise philosopher and sometimes a pious bluffer. Excuse me if I am talking from the point of view of a materialist, but beyond this we cannot claim more truth in life after death. It may be true, at the same time it may not be true. There is no point of practical verification. So the wisdom of the whole total wisdom of life after death put together forms only 50% of the probability and possibility of truth. And if we are not prepared to accept more than 50%, we can take the issue into consideration and discuss about it. But yet, if we begin to consider about the practical value of the subject, I think there is very little practical value about the understanding of death and life after death. With these few remarks, let us enter into the subject. Death is a name given by the human being, whereas the incident is common to the humans, animals and plants. The species of all the biological kingdoms have to pass through birth and death. But a name is given to birth and a name is given to death only by the human being. And if we consider from a precise and scientific point of view, we can give only that much of importance to birth as a chemical change, that is a biochemic change of matter, and the force that causes the change and the consciousness that drives the force to cause the change. So there are three aspects in it. The atoms of matter of the mineral kingdom converted into cells of the biological kingdom. It is called birth. Once again, the cells of the biological kingdom decomposed into the atoms of the mineral kingdom is called death. It is a change, and we can call it a change, but because we are afraid of it, we name it death. Because there is something sentimental in our mind about it, we look at it in a peculiar way. Because we have a sudden cutoff from our beloved ones, we are dreaded of it. Patanjali says it is the one inevitable passage of initiation which includes a spark of fear even to the most learned scientist of the world. And unless we pass through the passage as many times as are required to eliminate the spark of fear to the last trace, until that time death chases and hunts the human being, and it repeats and repeats and makes births and deaths inevitable. And when that point is reached, when death ceases to be an incident to the mind of the human being, then that particular human being is saved from death. That is how nature contrived. Nature is always wiser than any of the biological kingdom. And however great and rationalistic and intelligent the human creature may be, he is also behavioristic, and he is also one among the many biological species on this earth. Every activity of the human creature is also a behavior and nothing more, including what we call intelligence, what we call reasonable nature, what we call understanding, what we call rationalism. All these things come under behavior, and we can be more intelligent or less intelligent only as far as the circumstances permit. For example, one cannot make himself more intelligent or less intelligent unless he is permitted by nature, which works through legitimate reasoning. This is a fact which we can never deny, and which till today the human being could not disprove. With all our scientific knowledge in this scientific age, with all our wonderful technology and equipment, with all the inventions and discoveries, after all, we behave bad or good according to the century behavior. That is, we are only slaves of time. We respond to the mass mind of the humanity of this earth. And with all our intelligence and our originality and advancement, we could not help going into war and destruction again and again. We could not save ourselves from going into negativism. It is here that we have to spend more time. It is at this place that we have to bring out positive and practical solutions and We have to accept till today that we are also one among the animals. The difference is the best equipped being on this earth. The human body is more well equipped than the animal body, having more conveniences and facilities. The human mind has more dimensions to think and understand. Two things are specially given to the human species. One is discrimination, which is not there with any other creatures. This is the power to discriminate what is desirable and what is undesirable, and the right to choose what is desirable and reject what is not desirable. This grand key is given to the human being and not to the other beings. Another thing that is given to the human being exclusively is self-awareness. These are the only two things that are exclusive to the human fellow, and there is no third thing that is exclusive. Hunger, thirst, sleep, and sex, childbearing. These are all common to animals and the human beings. We can't claim anything special or exclusive about these things. In these aspects, we are one with all the beasts of the earth. And about these two master keys that are given to the human being, the real scientists of life, they teach us that the human birth is a great opportunity and not at all a privilege. We are expected to make best use of the opportunity given. That is what the gurus and the masters teach us. We never claimed this human birth, and before we were born, we were not in a stage to demand the human birth, but this is given to us. It is a valuable gift, and when once we have entered into the human kingdom, it is better to understand how valuable it is and what a great opportunity it is. Along with these two great things, there are some things that the human fellow inherited from the animal kingdom. One is fear. Fear is there with the biological kingdom from the animal kingdom. But there is one major difference. In the animal kingdom, fear is positive because it is only an instinct which helps self-protection and the protection of its young ones. But for this, there is no fear. There is fear of life and fear of the safety of its young ones. These are the only two aspects of fear that are there with the animal kingdom. But with the human kingdom, fear is magnified as if through a biconvex lens. Because we have a mechanism called intelligence, this mechanism works as a microscope, and this microscope has magnified the instinct of fear, and fear is intellectualized in the human being. It is no more an instinct. It has taken a negative turn, and we should be careful about it. The animals are in no way endangered by fear, whereas the human fellow keeps himself a timid fellow by fear. It causes inability to the human kingdom, whereas the same fear causes safety and security to the animal kingdom. So here we have to take a little care about this aspect. There are many forms of fear in the human body, in human kingdom. One is fear of the future, which is not at all there with the animal kingdom. This has made the human fellow almost useless. Instead of having a planning for the future, the average human fellow succumbs to the fear of the future. So, fear of the future is negative, whereas planning for the future is positive. Second thing is fear of needs, that is food, drink, housing and clothing. So the human fellow had to invent money to purchase these things, whereas the animals get the same things without money. This is the second manifestation of human fear. And for the fear of the future, man had to discover the insurance and assurances, and he has to discover payments and salaries, and pensions and gratuities, and indemnities. Even then, the human fellow is timid of the future, whereas without any one of these things, the animal walks free of fear on the street, as if mocking at the human animal. We have to accept a defeat, that we have made a negative use of fear instead of making a positive use of fear. It takes much philosophy and much spiritualism and much yoga and much theology and much religion and much moralization, much austerities for the human fellow to encourage himself and to forget about fear. Really an awful fall in evolution. We have no explanation to offer against this fall. Philosophy is necessary only to the human being, because the intellectualization of fear is only with the human being. What happens if there is no philosophy to a dog? It is not going to hell, but a human being has created his own hell in his own imagination and also on the practical way of doing things. He has the selfish way of doing things with which he binds himself, and others bind him because they are also selfish. This phenomenon is there with the human being only. And the next and the biggest manifestation of fear is fear of death. In animals, there is a fear of death also, but only that much extent that is required for the safety. But in the human fellow, it has crept into the future, so that the average adult human being is inevitably death conditioned in his logic. If one joins his duty and begin to earn money, he says to himself, I have to earn enough money before I die. I have to complete the building of the house before I die. I have to get my children married before I die. So there is a wall before his vehicle. The car is going at a tremendous speed, but there is a grand wall without an opening before his eyes. There is the dead end where his car should stop. So about more than 80% of the activities of the human creature are death conditioned. His logic is death conditioned. Really, we have to be ashamed of many things unless we live free from these things. Unless we are free from death conditioning in our logic, we cannot boast of any philosophy or theology. We should be ashamed of uttering the name of God, because our faith in God is a very, very dirty faith. If we have real faith, automatically we would not have had fear of death. The two things can never coexist. One is fear of death and the other is faith on God. One must be false, and if we have a fear of death, our faith in God must be an intellectual bluff, and there is no excuse to it. It is better to disbelieve God if our belief and fear of death persists and continues. This is the one point which the ancient seers have seen, a point which has no compromise. And then they started to understand why fear of death exists, why death has become an incident in the mind of this fellow, this human being. This is the cause why we have death as the caption in every philosophy book. Since we are also human beings, and since we are also no exception to it, we selected the same topic for the conference of this evening. Wherever it is discussed, it is only a dread of death that is the cause, and the method to come out of the dread of death is possible only by a scientific understanding of death. And freedom from the fear of death should be decided by everyone for himself. You can't assure it to others that you have come out of it, or you can't call anyone to come out of it. You can just make a loud thinking of it, and you have to work it out for yourself and not for others, because fear of death is purely personal to everyone, and it is not at all a philosophy to teach or moralize. This is the one point of spiritual discipline through which everyone has to pass for himself. No one can help us through initiations or making something seen by us. So let us try to understand how the masters of wisdom presented the aspect to us. We have created many hells and heavens that will be there after death. But remember, the hells of all religions and the heavens of all religions, they are all seen and worked out by people who have not yet died. So man stood on the one side of death and discussed about death and discussed about the life on the other side of death, and created his own heavens and his own hells, as a result of which a staunch Hindu will experience a Hindu death, and a Christian experiences a Christian death, whereas a Buddhist experiences a Buddhistic death. You know, for example, a holy, pious Christian, suppose he is going to die. In the last moments, when the consciousness is merging into God, he sees a brilliant cross and winged angels showering flowers and taking the fellow into the cross. And a staunch Hindu, before he is closing his eyes, he sees a big buffalo on the back of which there is a stalwart person called the Lord of Death. coming directly and throwing a noose and picking up the astral body and packing up in his bag and going away. And a pious Buddhist, while going, he sees golden Lord Buddha above, and this fellow is being lifted by Buddhist monks, lifting to the feet of Buddha. There is truth in every type of death, but the wonder of truth is it appears to everyone according to his own understanding of truth. That is the versatility of truth. Everyone works out his own concept about truth, and that is his truth, and it serves as his solution. It solves his problems, and the other man has no right to say that it is not true. This is the truth about truth. No, it's not humorous. Just think over the matter. I am just presenting to you the whole purview of human ability to understand truth. And we have two theories. One is life after death, going to God, or waiting until the day of judgment, and then there is the judgment. What all we have done is considered, and we are given the due position into the next stage of life. This is one aspect which carries much truth, but which should be studied carefully in a scientific way. When we leave the body, there are many layers, and we leave layer after layer when we die. This is observed by the masters of wisdom. And after leaving the physical body, we have some more layers which are with us. The pot is broken on the physical plane, but the fellow exists with many more vehicles. The outermost vehicle, which we call the physical body, will be broken first. But there is the second layer, which we call the etheric body, which is made up of lines of force. Just as the physical magnet has another invisible magnet in it, which is made up of lines of force, which can be seen only by experimenting with iron dust. Just as the physical magnet is different from the invisible magnet, the physical body is different from the body of forces. So, after the physical body is broken, we still exist in the etheric body for some time, but many of us see only the physical death, and we say the person is dead, and we look at the remnant called the corpse, and we express our feelings and sentiments. Looking at the body and thinking of the person is not there, the memory is there, and he lives only in our memory, but there is some duration after the death of the physical body, and it takes